Hi guys, up again here. Today we'll be doing a different thing. Instead of analyzing a manabase already made and try to find out how it works, we are trying to create a functioning manabase for Naya Slivers. Naya Slivers is a linear aggressive deck. That means it's an aggressive deck that's based around synergies. So most of your cards are slivers or cards that find slivers, and obviously all slivers get some benefits from other slivers. So this is a pretty standard list I took from the internet, but the mana base was a bit outdated because it didn't have any thriving lands. So yeah, this is going to be probably a bit longer. I'm going to be improvising a bit too. So excuse me if this goes a bit like kind of unexpected turns and all that, because this is me trying to figure out how to make this deck work. So first off, I have never actually played with Naya Slivers or even Celestian Slivers in Magic Online, so I don't have some of the cards. This is not an expensive deck, but buying these playsets and these cards are going to be like about 4 or 5 ticks for me, so I'm a bit short, so I'm not going to be buying them. But just for building the deck, I don't really need to have that. You can just add them on Magic Online and build your deck, and then find out if you like it, buy the cards and such. So how do this deck work? So as we said, it's an aggressive deck, but you have not many 1-drops, and most of your cards are 2-drops, and also you want most of your cards to be creatures, so Waniway and Beat Stampede are good. If you have a high number of non-creatures, then this will not find as many creatures as you want. So the list I took had 20 land and had 4 Gem Height Slivers. Celestian Slivers normally don't play this, I think, at least not the builds I saw in the past. And well, we can look also at Celestia and try to see the differences. That would be our starting point. So if I were to say, let's build Naya Slivers, then the first thing I will try to do is look at Celestian Slivers and try to work from there. Probably the Manabase is going to be different, right? So the first thing we need to see is what's our red cards, right? Why are we playing red in the first place? Is the payoff worth it? So the first card that this deck plays is Bladeback Sliver, which is a 2/2, so it's a bit bigger than normal slivers, and has all slivers creatures you control have tap, deal 1 damage to target player if you have no cards in hand. So this is a good curve topper in the deck, right? If your opponent is fog locking you, you can just tap your slivers to deal damage. So that's pretty good, only if you're being fog locked. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit vanilla, but there's nothing really wrong with a vanilla creature. You are already playing like Blade Sliver, which is almost vanilla, so that's a good thing to have, right? Because Fogtron is very big in this meta, and also with the Band deck that also has some fogs is very popular too. So this card can be very useful in some matchups. So basically this is a pre-board, right? As we saw, for example, in Boggles, where you have run through as a pre-board tech to fog locks. Here in Naya Slivers, we see the same thing with Bladeback Sliver. So that's mostly the way that this works, right? That's our payoff, to have an out versus fog locks. The good thing about this that's different that Boggles is that these decks digs a lot for creatures, so it can find Bladeback Sliver eventually if you play a longer game. Especially versus fog lock decks, it's normal that you reach the later stages of the game, so you are more than able to find a copy. Again, this tap ability doesn't really stack, so multiple Bladebacks are bad, so that's why you play only 3. It seems that the build I found doesn't have another in the sideboard, but I have seen maybe 3 on the main and 1 in the sideboard, I think is the most normal approach. The other red card is Hunter Sliver, which again doesn't stack really well, but it has all slivers have provoke. So provoke is a really stupid mechanic that allows you to use your creatures as removal. I say stupid in the sense that it's pretty powerful, right? If you have a 5/5 and you attack each turn, you are removing a creature of the opponent's each turn. Again, it's good against some decks. It's good if you have combat steps and you are not being foglocked. So it's useful for other builds and for other decks. I believe this is a great deck against fairies decks and elves decks where you can remove elves maybe not, but where you can remove an opposing threat or some small creatures that are really bugging you. So if you have this, you can remove a couple of blockers and just kill the ninja that they have, for example, or the mnemonic wall that they have, so they can't flicker it if they are tapped out, and so on. So an important thing about this and all slivers is that even though these don't have haste, they work as if they had haste, because when you play it, you can attack with, let's say, a Barren Sliver and provoke if you want to. So there's the upside there. So this is an aggressive deck, so we don't want to flood, right? So it's very important for us to have the correct amount of lands. We can't just play more lands and be happy with it. Again, also our winning way and the Stampede become worse if we have more lands than we need to. But at the same time, if we aren't able to reach 3 mana, then we have a couple of dead cards. So it's very important that we have the correct amount of lands, right? In this deck more than ever. So the reason I said that the mana base wasn't correct for this deck is that now with the thriving lands, you can build your deck with much more color consistency, right? Let's look at it. So thriving lands are these cycle of lands. Thriving Grove that allows you to tap for green or one of the mana of the chosen color. So this basically works as an evolving wilds, but with upside. The way this works is you play this and it will fix for one of your colors on the following turns. The same way as an evolving wilds would do, right? You play your evolving wilds, you fetch for any color basically that you care to have. So if we see, sorry about that. Yeah, this is the deck. So if we see this build has 4 Barrens and 1 Terramorphic Spans, and has after that some basics. So the way this mana works is if we put 4 of these on the deck, then we have basically 3 lands, right? It's not going to always tap for all 3 colors, but when you need red, you can just play this and name red. And if you already have like white on another land, then you can just play this for red in the hopes of them finding one of your red slivers or red cards even. So this is pretty important because these are, in this deck at least, is almost strictly better evolving wilds. It's not strictly better Ash Barrens, because with Ash Barrens you can fix your mana in that turn, right? You can cycle your Ash Barrens away for plains, play it, and then you have white mana in that turn if you only had one of the other colors. So there is advantages and disadvantages. So the first thing I will say is that maybe removing Ash Barrens isn't correct. But I believe that removing Terramorphic Spans is worth it for this build, for this Thriving Grove, because by far the most, let's say if I can sort by color, the most the most common color is green, then white, then red, and post board you have more green, more white than any other color. So I believe that Thriving Groves is going to be the land that we use at least, and then if we have more space, we are going to add some Thriving Heaths. So if we just start with this as a baseline and just copy this, for Ash Barrens I need 1 mountain, I don't want more. Cool mountain like this, then some forest, again, it's important that your forests are cool ones. Plains. So something like this is going to, yeah, this is a good looking plain. So something like this would technically work. Again, this is just eyeballing it. We have more tablands in this build than in this one, so we probably will remove a couple of flash barrens and such. But we can also see if we want. I believe that this deck wants Ash Barrens. Ash Barrens are a great land for a deck that tries to unload their hand, because you can always just play it if you are already fixed. So that's an upside for these kinds of decks where the tempo is very important. You normally care more about the mana you have the turn you are playing your lands than in the following turns, if that makes sense. So I think Ash Barrens is going to be worth it. But let's see, if we have 20 lands, we also have a couple of Naya Slivers, which not only fix but they ramp. And these creatures are amazing. If you didn't know, up until recently we didn't have any tappers, any mana dorks that fix for any color. And Naya Sliver was the only mana dork that tapped for any color in Pauper format. But now we have another creatures that do that. I believe that, I don't remember the name, but there was one in Theros that was a 1/1 that tapped for any color. So it was basically this, but without the Slivers have, etc. So if we find one of these, then we are going to be pretty much okay in the mana development kind of department. And if we have one of these, we are going to be okay with colors, and Ash Barrens are a bit different because we need another land to unlock them. So if we count non-Ash Barrens lands, we have 16. As we already saw this calculation before, but if we go on a hypergeometric calculator and do the, I have 16 cards and I have 16 lands and I want one. This is going to be pretty much all the time. But if we add this, we need at least 2 in our opening hand. So we have this calculation is going to give us around 75%, which is not good, actually. That's very low. 75% of the time we are not going to have enough mana to develop. We need at least 2 mana for us to unlock the Naya Sliver, otherwise we aren't able to play. So what would be a better amount of mana? Let's see. If we have 22 here, the calculation is around this. If we have 24, it's around 85. So maybe we really can't play 24 lands here, right? That's too much. Maybe we could even play some elves to fix our mana, or maybe we are just dumb to mulligan a bit. Let's start with 20 lands, because if we mulligan aggressively to 75% of the time, right, to have 2 mana, let's do some sample hands, as we usually do. For example, this is one great example. We have all of our colors, we have all of our payoffs, but we can't really keep this hand, because if we don't find a land in the following turns, then we aren't able to unload our hand. So we're going to play dorky 1/1s, right? Yeah. Okay, so we would be unpunished. Here, for example, we are very flooded. I don't know exactly, I haven't played a lot with this deck, so I believe this could be a mulligan. Maybe it's a close one, I don't know. We have all of our colors, but we don't have any clock. This is really slow as a clock for an aggro deck. This is great because one card draw spell means that we can play this on the first turns and then draw everything with Winning Way. Here the same thing, we have a couple of lords and a Winning Way. I think this is a keep, this is a keep. So this could be fine. We have a couple of lords, and if we find any lands, we are able to play. Yeah, this is good, I believe. So this is recording? Yeah, cool. So let's see. If we keep 20 lands, we are doomed to mulligan a bit, right? because we are going to find that around 25% of the time we don't have enough mana. And at the same time, if we don't have one of these spells with Mulian, no, that's not correct. That's not correct. So that's not a good baseline. So let's see what else. We need to calculate what are the odds of we finding one Naya Slivers in our opener hand. This is a pretty normal calculation we do all the time. It's around 40%. To have one 4-off in your opening hand, that's a shorthand that you would just memorize around 40% of the time. You're going to have one of these. So if we count one of these as an additional mana sources, we have 24. And what are the odds of we finding the necessary mana to cast our landing winning way, or sorry, lead Stampede? It's around less than 80%. So far this deck really looks inconsistent in the mana development kind of situation. So I believe we could upgrade a bit this part of the deck, yeah, by adding a couple of elves that add mana. That will help us ramp and also develop our mana without decreasing the consistency of winning wave. We could even play less lands, right? We could just remove a couple of these. We are going to see at the colors later, but let's see. I believe that Abyssin's Pilgrim would be fine for the deck. Why? Because it fixes our colors for this. If we can't play this, then it means that we are going to be able to play this. So it's going to help us with the color situation. Then we could remove one of these because we have card draw for it. So we can then calculate how many of these are we able to find. And then lastly, then probably remove some of our Naya Slivers because they are like, maybe the worst is this one or this one, I don't know. But let's just go with this. So if we add a bit more here in the mana situation, then we are going to have more hits for winning way. And we are going to have a bit of RAM to unload our hand faster. And this can also with edicts, and sometimes our opponents will remove them trying to stop our mana development situation. So that's, I don't know if it's an strict upside, but it's something that to consider. So if we have this, we have around all of this mana, 26. So if we have that here, we're going to have around 85% of the time, 85% of the time enough mana to cast the Stampede on turn 3. So that's incredible. That's very, very good. And if we have this as also helping us cast our 2-drops, we have 22 here for 2-drops, which is around 81% of the time, which is also better. So maybe that will make the deck more consistent, right? Even though this isn't a sliver, it's still a dork that helped us with our game plan, I believe. So then we can start looking at color. I just put some lands here. This isn't what I think is the most correct approach, but let's look at this. How many white sources we need? So we need around 13, I believe, to have one in our opening hand. Maybe 14 would be better. Let's see how many do we have right now. So it looks like we are able to just play a lot if we want to. So we can start by removing a couple of Ash Barrens because we have less lands, so we want less of Ash Barrens. And this will be 14 sources. And then we can look at how many forests. Oh, we can also add the Naya Slivers and additional white sources, but I think that we don't want to wait until the third turn to cast our 1-drops. That would be a bit worse, in my opinion. So let's look at how many green sources do we have. So with this we have 11, which is very, very bad. Okay, maybe Yeah, I was intending to do that. So let's look at this. So if we have around 14 here, we need at least 14 to be able to cast our Manabases Pilgrim affix for our colors. So if we have this, is still 13, which is okay. And we can even add Naya Slivers as fallback, and that brings the number to quite a bit more. So far this looks quite correct. Let's look at our off color of red. We have a couple of sources here. In total it's around 11, but again these creatures and these other creatures here, we don't really need them for turn 2. We can have them on turn 3 or 4, but let's look at what are the odds of we having it on turn 2, and it's still pretty high, right? So yeah, I believe something like this would work. Probably someone will say that having Manabases Pilgrim in your Slivers decks is stupid, but I don't know. I feel that this makes the deck more consistent. So let's see a bit about the hit rates of Winning Way and the Stampede. So how many creatures do we have? We have 34 creatures with this current build of the deck. If you don't play Manabases Pilgrim and you play two more creatures, two more Slivers, you will have around 32 instead of 34, but I'm going to do the calculation with what I'm building now. So 34 is going to be the amount of creatures that we have, and we are casting Winning Way. So we will remove, as we always do, the two lands from here and the Winning Way that we are casting. And the sample size is going to be 4 because that's the amount of cards that Winning Way looks. So let's look quickly at the numbers for each different color. Let me open up a notepad. So let's look at this. The probability of we hitting exactly 0 is this, which is very low. Then the probability of we hitting exactly one creature is this. Of course, these numbers vary depending on what you already saw of your deck. You can do this calculation on the fly too if you want to, but we are going to have just a quick overview here. So it looks like most of the time it's going to be around 2.5 creatures. Yeah, so I almost lost everything I did. So okay, so this is the curve that we are expecting. This is the expectancy curve of Winning Way. If we had a way of plotting this in like a graph, we will see something like a curve that tops at around 2.5, I believe. Yeah, mostly 2.5 creatures per Winning Way. So it means that it's going to be most of the time Winning Way is going to be kind of better than an divination for 2 mana, which is great in this deck. Let's continue with Stampede. Stampede in difference with Winning Way looks at 5 cards, so we are going to do the same calculations, but with one less land in our deck, and we are going to look at 5 cards instead of 4. So let's start with this. 0, this number, 1, this number. So an important thing here is that we are looking at the probability of hitting exactly 1 instead of looking at the probability of having at least 2 or at least 1. That means that with this we can plot, like as we said, an approximation to the function of the expectancy of these spells. So all of this sounds a bit technical, but don't worry, it's very simple. This is just what we expect in approximation to see for the amount of creatures that we are going to see. In a relative common case scenario, we are going to see around 3. Yeah, it looks like exactly 3 is going to be the expectancy for the stampeding with this deck. if you have less creatures, you can change this here. Instead of 34, you can change to 32 and do the same calculations and try to get those numbers and plot here and see how it changes. It's going to be more or less the same thing. Probably it's going to be around 3 and around 2.5 here. But yeah, sometimes you're going to fail miserably and find only one around 6% of the time. That's more or less what this helps us to see. So yeah, that's more or less it for this video. It ended up being um, pretty short, actually. I believe I don't think it was longer or as long as I thought it would be. An important thing is that here this build has Journey to Nowhere and Leave No Trace, which don't really work with our card draw spells. I will try to use this card that I forgot the name. Oh, I know, Ray of Revelation. Yeah, this one, instead of Leave No Trace. Even though Leave No Trace is better in some of the time, Ray of Revelation has flashback, which means that if you cast Winnie Way and find this, it's actually putting it in the graveyard, right? Because that's what Winnie Way does. So you actually draw it with Winnie Way. The same way as Prismatic Strands has flashback and thus is better with Winnie Way. And then Journey to Nowhere, I don't know. Again, this looks a bit worse. I don't know exactly for which matchup you're bringing Journey to Nowhere. Maybe try to consider changing Journey to Nowhere to another card. I don't know. Another thing that we could be doing instead of Ray of Revelation, which is a bit bad, even though it can be a double destroy enchantment for 3 mana, we could be playing like Caustic Caterpillar. This is another possibility. This is a creature that can be sacrificed to destroy an artifact or enchantment. So I don't know which one's better here. Maybe Caustic Caterpillar because it can be found by the Stampede, and also you can just play it and start pressuring the opponent with a 1/1. I believe that if this was my build, I would put a couple of these instead of what we had. I don't know exactly what are you trying to fight with Fairy Macabre, but yeah, this is good because it's a creature. You want to have mostly creatures here, or cards that have flashback like Prismatic Strands. And I'm not sure what's Journey to Nowhere for. Maybe it's for Heroic, because Journey to Nowhere really owns Heroic. I don't know what you could be playing in this slot here. It's something to consider. So I don't know. This is my build so far. Yeah. So let's review a bit about the mana base that I built here. It was a bit done a bit fast though. So I wouldn't blame you if you want to do the calculations yourself and try to find other possible builds or other builds of the mana base. But the thing is, I don't want more thriving lands, because thriving lands enter tapped, and you want to have as many as untapped lands as you can because you're an aggressive deck. So tempo is very important. Ash Barrens helps with that. So if we remove the tap lands here, we have in total 14 lands that can enter untapped, and thus we have enough mana to kind of develop, right? Pretty efficiently here. So I think that Thriving Lands in this deck is obviously necessary evil, in the sense that you would prefer to play untapped lands, but if we change this to either forests or plains, then one of the consistencies of our colors are going to take a big hit. So another thing you could do is like play a lot of lands and remove all tap lands for untapped lands, but we can't really pay that price here because it will bite us in the butt when we try to cast a Windy Whale at Stampede. So I think this is what I would try first. Maybe some of you guys are more experienced with Slivers can tell me why Avalsin's Pilgrim isn't good here. I don't know. I just see this card and I normally don't like mana dogs, but I think that in this build makes sense. And even if you look at other builds, I kind of did a cleanup here, so I removed most of my janky decks, but Absent Soul Sisters, for example, play a lot of these dorky mana dogs, and it was a relatively good deck. It was a deck that played most of these, the lesser amount of lands as possible and the biggest amount of card draws possible to maximize Winding Way and the Stampede. And I'm trying to do kind of the same thing here, while also having a good consistency here. So what I did by adding Navasis Pilgrim, and this is important, I increased the consistency of our colors. So it means that we are going to mulligan a bit less, in theory at least. So if we look at this hand, this is a bad hand. If we had another land, we would be fine, but we can't really keep this. Here we have like a really good hand. If you think how would you sequence this, you could play turn 1 Avacyn's Pilgrim, turn 2 land, you have 3 mana, you can play like Gemhide Sliver and Plate Sliver. So you would be developing a lot better than if this was a Plains, let's say, right? So I think that it's worth it, but yeah, feel free to prove me wrong. Here this is an awful hand, we don't have any mana, the same thing here. Here we have, yeah, we have a turn 2, turn 1 tap land, so we see the tempo hit of playing tap lands, but we play more or less the same amount of tap lands that the previous build. Let's look at this real quick. Here we play 5 tap lands and we play 6 in my build. So yeah, it's going to have a bit more hit there. Here we can play a turn 1 tap land, turn 2 we have Avacyn's Pilgrim and another tap land, and then we can start playing things. Double tap land is a bit rough in this deck, but well, what can you do? So yeah, I think this could work. Feel free to try it. I may be tempted to buy the cards and try the deck myself. I don't know. I think this is a good approach for this. So again, leave me a comment if you want to chat about this. Also, feel free to ping me in the Discord or whatever. So I'm more than open to suggestions and everything. In fact, this was suggested by Frostfile, so big shout out to him and a hug also. So he was like, how can we work with thriving lands in the Slivers deck? So the first thing I would do is try Avacyn's Pilgrim. Otherwise, we can just change some lands around and play more or less the same thing that we played before. But I think the probabilities aren't in our favor there. It would be a very high variance deck. I believe that this is a less variance deck, also improving your winning ways on the Stampede, even though hitting an Avacyn's Pilgrim is kind of bad because it's not a great creature to have in the late game. It's still a creature, so I believe it's better to hit it than not to hit it, but yeah. At the same time, you have a couple less levers, so that's a bit bad. Yeah. So another important thing is that these cards are like silver bullets that you can find with Winning Way and the Stampede. You could do the calculation of the same thing that we did before. What are the odds of we finding one of these with Winning Way? The difference here would be that instead of having 32 hits, this is the Stampede. So instead of having 32 hits, you would have 3 or 1 or 2. Let's say 2. Yeah, this doesn't work because, yeah. The probability of hitting 1 or more is around 70% of the time with one Stampede. So that's not really great. The probability of hitting a one-off is even less, right? So you can kind of calculate that on the fly. Again, if you don't have it in your hand, it means that you saw a lot of cards that aren't Bladeback Slivers. So the probability is going to go up, right? If you remove this and remove the opening hand to something like 49 cards left in your deck, it's going to increase to around 10% of the time to hit your Hunter's Sliver. But it's there to find if you need it in the late game against some creature deck. So I believe that's good. So I think that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching if you're watching this. Yeah, so see you next time.